Alright, welcome back. I know camera's in a different position. Shut up. Shut up. And also I got a new haircut. If you make fun of me, I will cry, so do not do that. Welcome back, guys. So, I've been using the Retroid Pocket 3 extensively since I got it last week, and let me just say, I love this thing. I'll be using this review to explain why I love it so much, but let me just say, this thing is fantastic for the price. Let's start off with a quick rundown of the specs that are inside of this thing. The Retroid Pocket 3 uses one 2 GHz and three 1.8 GHz CPU, a PowerVR GE8300 GPU clocked at 800 MHz, a 4000 mAh battery, 2 or 3 GB of RAM depending on if you want to pay $10 more for the extra gig of RAM, and 32 GB of internal storage. It has a 4.7-inch 750 by 1334 touchscreen with a backlight that apparently goes up to 450 nits of brightness. It runs on Android 11, and they claim it helps with performance for emulation, but I've seen no difference in emulation or power compared to what others got out of the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. It can output to 720p via mini HDMI, and 4K TVs are not supported. Looking at the specs for the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus compared to this thing, aside from the bigger screen, Android 11, and an extra gig of RAM if you pay for it, they basically have the same specs. Now, that's not me trying to deter you from buying this thing. It's just to make sure that people who bought the 2 Plus earlier this year don't have any buyer's remorse. Getting down to the hardware side of things, the feel of this device is really nice. I wish it was a little thicker so that using the joysticks would be more comfortable, but it's not an uncomfortable device by any means, and even using the joysticks is not uncomfortable. The slick back makes it really easy to hold, and the triggers being laid out like a normal controller makes it really enjoyable to use. The triggers aren't analog, but they still feel amazing to use. The D-pad is in an optimal spot for 2D games, which is what you'd primarily be using the device for, and it reminds me a lot of the Odin D-pad. I said that in my unboxing video last week, but still, it reminds me a lot of it, just smaller and a little bit shorter. The joysticks are a similar story in that they remind me of the Odin's joysticks. Now, that's not really a knock at them, but I wish they had gone for the full Joy-Con look with like actual Joy-Con joysticks instead of just cheaping out and going with what I went with, which are good joysticks, just could have been better. The placement of them may also seem uncomfortable to some people, but I've actually had no issue with them. I've been using them to play Paper Mario on the N64 for the past few days, and I've been able to play for hours at a time without my hands cramping up or having like any uncomfortable positions with my hands. I have been thinking of trying to 3D print a grip for this thing, that I can't find any good 3D models, and at the same time I can't make a grip. So if any of you can make a grip for the Retroid Pocket 3, please do. I'd love to 3D print one. The buttons feel good. I kind of prefer them over the Odin's buttons as they have less travel to them and they click a lot more, and using them with my hands gripped on the device like this feels amazing. Feels great. The function buttons are placed in weird spots though. The start and select buttons are on the top where I'd usually expect the volume buttons to be, because that's where they are in the Odin. And the volume buttons are on the side. Now, I know the company might have gone with the start and select on the top so that the front is this nice like flat look aside from the buttons, but I mean honestly I would have preferred just having the start and select buttons at the top like they are on the Switch Lite. The home button is placed on the right side, which made me worry about any accidental presses that might occur when I have my palm on the side, but luckily it takes 2 presses to actually activate the home button feature where it takes you home, and I haven't had any issues with accidentally going home in my week of testing, so you don't have to worry there. The shell I got with my device is gray, but there are a bunch of different colors you can get it in, including 16-bit, which is the one I got, and white. Now there has been some controversy surrounding the white color, because they have a render on their website, and looking at some unboxing videos, that does not look like the final product at all. So this is what it's supposed to look like. Now this is what someone unboxed. Looks fine, right? Wrong. Look again. That color is ugly as sin. Now, I wouldn't recommend getting the white color as of now, but it's not like there aren't a plethora of different colors you can choose from. There are a ton. Just wait a bit, because the batch of white shells they have looks really bad. But I don't see that changing anytime soon. Maybe just wait until I make an announcement or something. But just don't get white, unless you like that ugly color I just showed. But besides a few issues with the joysticks, the hardware feels really nice. I don't think I'm gonna switch out the buttons anytime soon, unless someone else does and says there's a substantial difference, because these buttons feel good. great, dare I say. So actually booting up the device, there's some boot up sequence that plays that's reminiscent of some company logo or game logo, something like that. And I guess it's a reference to how the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus had one that looked similar to the Game Boy Advance boot up sequence, which probably would make more sense on this device considering it has a bigger screen. It's too late now. In the setup, you have the choice between using the AOSP launcher and the Retroid launcher. I went with the Retroid launcher, and I think most people should too, because it's the sleekest, and unless you like basic Android, just how it looks, the way that this launcher handles ROMs is the best I've ever seen in a device. Also, quick note, when you're doing the setup, if you see any apps, when it brings you to that app list that you can install, if you see any apps that relate to any games you want to emulate, install them, because the emulators that they have on here are well optimized for the device, and it's actually really great. GameCube and 3DS don't really run well just because this thing really isn't well optimized or powerful enough to run those systems, but everything else on here is really great. When you get into the launcher, it'll bring you to a screen where you can add apps to act as a home screen, basically. Reminds me a lot of the Odin launcher, but pressing the emulation button on the bottom left brings you to a section that kind of looks like a Switch home screen. Clicking systems will allow you to add folders for the systems you have ROMs for. Clicking on the folders and pressing ROMs on the bottom left will let you scan folders for your ROMs. It'll search for box art, and it'll automatically link the game to a certain emulator and controls, which is amazing. It just gives the consumer less to do. All you have to do is boot it up, direct it to your ROM folder, and you're golden. It sometimes won't be able to find the right box art, but all you have to do is download one from Google Images on the device, and it'll automatically link to the ROM, which is great. The N64 emulator is great because it makes B and Y, A and B, and A is fast forward, and X is kind of a pause button. Like, it doesn't pause the game in a traditional sense, it kind of just stops it in its tracks. Now, actual emulation is amazing. Everything up to N64, DS, Dreamcast, and PSP uses RetroArch, because N64, DS, Dreamcast, and PSP all have their own emulators that the Retroid launcher defaults to. Emulation on here is amazing. Everything that needs to run well runs really well and looks great on this wide screen. Now, I did have some occasional graphical glitches and slowdowns in Paper Mario, which led to it crashing the app and not loading at all. So I just decided to bite the bullet and pay $4 for the Pro version of MovePen 64 Plus FZ, and I just exported my saves from the original app, put it in the new app, redirected the Retroid launcher to that app instead for Paper Mario, and it works fine now. The only thing I'm missing is the frame rate counter on the top, but I could just add that in if I wanted. No other game has given me issues like this except for Yoshi's Story on the N64, but I haven't seen anyone else mention this. I think it's just an issue with the emulator, but I'm not even sure if it is an issue at all. Just something I ran into. I can't figure out how to fix, so I had to buy an emulator. Otherwise, it's all great. The emulation performance is what you'd expect out of this thing. I kind of wish the extra gig of RAM I had paid for did more for emulation purposes, but I mean, I have my Odin, so it's not like playing GameCube games and 3DS games on the go is such a far-fetched idea for me. And I can already play 3DS games on the go using my 3DS. So I really like this thing. It's smaller than any other device I've used before, aside from the RGB10S, which I didn't really like. And it has enough horsepower to play a lot of retro systems. Of course, you can play your SNES and Genesis games, but I'm talking about N64 and PSP. That's what I'm interested in. If you want my verdict, this is probably the best bang for your buck device you can get right now. It's sleek and comfortable to hold. It has an amazing D-pad and the buttons feel nice. It emulates very well with little to no compromises. I know I spoke of the joysticks as if they're like some atrocity that I never want to see again, but they're really not that bad. I just wish they went a little more. They did a little more with them. Overall, if the Odin Lite didn't exist, this device would probably be the best Android handheld for your money. It's not going to be the most powerful because you still have others, but for $120 at your starting price, and it can emulate N64 and like GameCube if you put the resolution down to 0.3 times, it's definitely worth it. But the design, the $120 starting price, the buttons, the D-pad, that's just worth it on its own. The emulation, is just a nice plus. So, would I recommend this device to someone who's just starting out in the portable emulation market? I think the answer is probably obvious by now, but yes, of course. It emulates well and the Retroid launcher is a breeze. I wish more companies did launchers like this. The closest I can probably think of is the Odin launcher, but it's just not as intuitive as this one is. Alright, I'm done rambling. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you next week for something. Probably something about the GPT Win 4. I want to discuss that. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've pre-ordered one of these. I will see you next week, like I just said. Goodbye.